The day began with a jolt. The harsh reality of their existence was a constant, unyielding presence. A prisoner, still shrouded in the remnants of a restless sleep, would be shaken awake. The nights offered no respite, only a brief escape from the relentless torment that awaited with the dawn. The cold, damp air of the barracks filled his lungs, a stark reminder of the harsh conditions they endured. Each breath was a struggle, a fight against the oppressive environment that sought to break their spirits. He was met with the stench of sweat, sickness, and fear. The barracks were overcrowded, the air thick with the scent of human suffering. It was a place where hope was a distant memory, replaced by the ever-present dread of what the day might bring. This was the reality of a Nazi concentration camp, a place where hope dwindled with each passing moment. The prisoners were trapped in a nightmare, their lives reduced to a daily struggle for survival. The morning roll call, a meticulously orchestrated spectacle of cruelty, awaited. It was a ritual designed to break their spirits, to remind them of their powerlessness in the face of their captors' absolute control. Prisoners, emaciated and vulnerable, were lined up like cattle. Their bodies were frail, their eyes hollow, yet they stood in line, a testament to their enduring will to survive. Guards, their faces etched with a chilling indifference, barked orders. Their voices were sharp, cutting through the cold morning air, a constant reminder of the prisoners' subjugation. Any infraction, a cough or a stumble, was met with swift and brutal punishment. The guards' cruelty knew no bounds, and the prisoners lived in constant fear of their wrath. The message was clear: resistance was futile. The prisoners were reminded daily of their helplessness, their every action scrutinized and punished without mercy. The roll call served as a stark reminder of the prisoners' dehumanized state. They were no longer seen as individuals, but as mere numbers, stripped of their identities and humanity. They were no longer individuals with names, families, and dreams. Their past lives were a distant memory, replaced by the harsh reality of their current existence. They were reduced to numbers, expendable cogs in the Nazi machinery of extermination. Each prisoner was a statistic, a part of the grim calculus of death that defined the camp's existence. Each day brought fresh horrors, yet the human spirit, though battered and bruised, clung to life with a ferocity that defied the surrounding darkness. The prisoners found strength in their shared suffering, a bond that helped them endure the unendurable. Survival became a victory in itself, a testament to the indomitable will that flickered within each prisoner. Despite the overwhelming odds, they fought to stay alive, to hold on to the sliver of hope that remained. The day had just begun, but the fight for survival was already in full swing. Each moment was a battle, a test of their resilience and determination. In the face of unimaginable cruelty, they found the strength to endure, to resist the darkness that sought to consume them. The meagre rations provided by the camp were a calculated cruelty designed to weaken and break the prisoners' spirits. Breakfast, if it could be called that, was a watery gruel. It lacked any nutritional value, offering only the faintest illusion of sustenance. The gnawing pangs of hunger were a constant companion, a relentless reminder of the deprivation that permeated every aspect of their existence. The midday meal was often little better, a thin soup made with rotten vegetables and scraps of meat, if any could be found. It offered a momentary respite from the gnawing hunger, but did little to nourish their emaciated bodies. The deliberate withholding of food was not an oversight. It was a calculated strategy employed by the Nazis to weaken the prisoners' resolve and make them more susceptible to disease. The lack of proper nutrition took a devastating toll on their bodies and minds, leaving them weak, vulnerable, and susceptible to the ever-present threat of illness. Pause 3S. An overview of the tortures endured by prisoners, highlighting the brutal and inhumane conditions of the various tortures inflicted upon the prisoners. The script will include harrowing accounts and vivid descriptions to convey the brutal realities faced by the inmates. Pause 1. AS. Torture was a daily reality in the concentration camps, a method of control and a tool of terror employed by the Nazis. The methods were as varied as they were cruel, each designed to inflict maximum pain and suffering. Physical torture was a common tactic. Prisoners were subjected to beatings with fists, batons, and whips, their bodies left bruised and broken. The guards took perverse pleasure in their cruelty, often inventing new ways to inflict pain. Some prisoners were forced into stress positions for hours on end, their muscles cramping and spasming as they struggled to maintain the unnatural postures. The agony was excruciating, a relentless assault on their physical and mental fortitude. Pause 1S. The psychological torment was equally devastating. Prisoners were often subjected to mock executions, the terror of impending death hanging over them like a dark cloud. They were blindfolded and lined up, the sound of gunfire ringing in their ears as they awaited the fatal shot that never came. The relief of survival was fleeting, replaced quickly by the realization that the nightmare was far from over. Sleep deprivation was another common tactic. Prisoners were kept awake for days on end, their minds and bodies pushed to the brink of collapse. The lack of rest left them disoriented and delirious, their sense of reality slipping away with each passing hour. Pause 1S. Some prisoners were subjected to medical experiments, their bodies used as test subjects in the Nazis' pursuit of scientific knowledge. These experiments were often conducted without anesthesia, the pain and terror experienced by the prisoners unimaginable. The scars left by these experiments were not only physical but also psychological, a constant reminder of the inhumanity they had endured. Pause 1S. The tortures inflicted upon the prisoners were not just acts of cruelty, but calculated strategies to break their spirits and strip them of their humanity. The constant threat of violence and the ever-present fear of torture created an atmosphere of perpetual terror, a living nightmare from which there was no escape. The prisoners were left with deep psychological scars, the trauma of their experiences haunting them long after the camps were liberated. The memories of the torture they endured, the pain and suffering inflicted upon them, served as a grim testament to the depths of human cruelty and the resilience of the human spirit in the face of unimaginable horror. Forced labor formed the backbone of the Nazi concentration camp system. It was a meticulously planned and executed strategy to dehumanize and exploit the prisoners, stripping them of their dignity and reducing them to mere tools of labor. It was a brutal and dehumanizing experience, one that left indelible marks on the bodies and souls of those who endured it. The prisoners, already weakened by starvation and disease, were subjected to grueling work that pushed them beyond the limits of human endurance. Designed to exploit and ultimately extinguish the prisoners' physical and mental strength, the forced labor was a calculated method of extermination. The Nazis aimed to break the spirit of the prisoners, to crush any semblance of hope or resistance. Under the watchful eyes of armed guards, prisoners were marched to various work sites, their bodies already racked with fatigue and hunger. The daily march itself was a test of endurance, a grueling journey that sapped their remaining strength. Their bodies, emaciated and frail, struggled to keep up with the relentless pace set by the guards. Hunger gnawed at their insides, a constant reminder of their dire situation. The work was arduous and dangerous. Tasks were assigned with little regard for the prisoners' physical condition, and the harsh conditions only exacerbated their suffering. The labor was designed to be as grueling as possible, ensuring that the prisoners were constantly on the brink of collapse. Some were forced to clear rubble, their bare hands blistered and bleeding. The sharp edges of the debris cut into their flesh, leaving wounds that often became infected due to the lack of medical care. Others toiled in quarries, hauling heavy stones under the scorching sun or biting wind. The physical demands of the work were immense, and the prisoners' bodies, already weakened by malnutrition, struggled to cope with the relentless strain. The threat of violence hung heavy in the air, a constant reminder of the guards' absolute power. Any sign of weakness or disobedience was met with brutal punishment, reinforcing the prisoners' sense of helplessness and fear. Exhaustion became a way of life, a state of being that permeated every waking moment. The prisoners were granted only brief moments of rest, and even these were filled with the dread of the work that awaited them. The prisoners worked until they collapsed, their bodies pushed to the very brink of human endurance. The relentless pace and the harsh conditions took a severe toll on their health, and many succumbed to the physical and mental strain. Many did not survive the ordeal, their bodies simply giving out under the relentless strain. The camp's brutal regime claimed countless lives, each death a testament to the inhumanity of the forced labor system. Those who did survive carried the physical and emotional scars of their forced labor, a testament to the cruelty they had endured. The memories of the suffering and the loss of their fellow prisoners haunted them long after the camps were liberated. The haunted expressions of the survivors reflected the deep psychological trauma they had experienced. Their ordeal was a stark reminder of the depths of human cruelty and the resilience of the human spirit in the face of unimaginable suffering. Section 4. The cruel spectacle of punishment. Afternoon roll call mirrored the morning's brutality. It was another opportunity for the guards to assert their dominance and for the prisoners to be reminded of their precarious existence. The slightest infraction, a missing button or a misplaced glance, could result in swift and brutal punishment. Beatings were commonplace, meted out with a chilling indifference that defied comprehension. Prisoners were often forced to watch as their fellow inmates were tortured or executed, a deliberate tactic designed to instill fear and obedience. The punishments were not merely physical, they were psychological torture, designed to strip away the prisoner's dignity and humanity. They were forced to perform humiliating acts, their torment serving as a source of amusement for their captors. The guards, drunk on power and fueled by a toxic ideology, seemed to relish in the suffering they inflicted. The afternoon roll call was a stark reminder of the prisoners' utter powerlessness, a chilling display of inhumanity that left them emotionally drained and broken. Section 5. A brief respite marred by despair. The evening meal, like its predecessors, offered little respite from the gnawing hunger that plagued the prisoners. Each day they lined up, their faces gaunt and eyes hollow, hoping for a morsel that might stave off the relentless pangs of starvation. It was often the same watery soup from midday, perhaps with a small piece of bread that had to last until the following day. The soup, barely more than water with a few floating bits of vegetables, offered scant nutrition. The bread, hard and stale, was a precious commodity, often divided and shared among friends. The prisoners, their bodies and spirits crushed by a day of back-breaking labour and relentless cruelty, ate in silence. The silence was heavy, filled with unspoken fears and the weight of their collective suffering. Each spoonful was a reminder of their dire circumstances, a bitter taste of their harsh reality. There was little conversation, only the clatter of spoons against metal bowls and the heavy sighs of exhaustion. The few words exchanged were often whispers of encouragement or shared memories of better times, fleeting moments of humanity in an otherwise inhumane existence. The barracks, overcrowded and filthy, offered little protection from the elements. The walls, thin and poorly insulated, did little to keep out the biting cold or the sweltering heat. The roof leaked and the floor was often damp and muddy, adding to the misery of their living conditions. The stench of sweat, disease and despair hung heavy in the air. It was a smell that clung to their clothes and skin, a constant reminder of their plight. The squalid conditions bred not only physical illness, but also a deep, pervasive sense of hopelessness. The prisoners slept on wooden bunks, often crammed together like animals. The bunks, hard and uncomfortable, offered little rest. Many nights were spent tossing and turning, haunted by nightmares and the ever-present fear of what the next day might bring. Privacy was non-existent, and the constant proximity to so much suffering took its toll. The lack of personal space meant that every cough, every groan of pain was shared. The emotional burden of witnessing the daily struggles of their fellow prisoners was immense. Disease spread like wildfire in these conditions, and many succumbed to illnesses that would have been easily treatable in the outside world. The lack of medical supplies and proper care meant that even minor ailments could become deadly. The sight of a friend or bunkmate wasting away was a common yet heartbreaking occurrence. The barracks, meant to provide shelter, became another source of misery, a breeding ground for despair and death. The deteriorating conditions reflected the neglect and cruelty of their captors. Each day in the barracks was a battle for survival, a test of endurance against overwhelming odds. The brief respite of the evening meal was marred by the ever-present shadow of despair, a stark reminder of the harsh reality they faced.